Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Friday, September 12th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you on this episode. We got a little bit of baseball news you should know. Anthony Volpe has been playing through a torn labrum. Oh, okay. An explanation for Volpe's 2025 season in one fell swoop. We'll dig into the implications of that in just a few minutes. Got a few mailbag questions, including one about the Rays moving back into the Trop in 2026 and what that might mean for the production of some of their power hitters. A great mailbag question, actually. And we've got our senior hot dog correspondent, Niv Shah, joining us later in the show. Niv is back with the Miami Dog and some long-term league advice. If you're trying to make pickups at the right price this time of year, how do you do it? We dig into that question. We've also got our regular weekend waiver preview jammed in today as well. So a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time to cover it. Let's start with the Volpe news. And when this came out on Thursday, when it was revealed that Anthony Volpe was playing through a torn labrum, I just kind of sat at my desk and yelled, aha! Like, now I know. So Anthony Volpe dove for a ball back on May 3rd, felt a pop in his shoulder, had imaging done. The Yankees believed what they saw in the imaging was the result of a previous injury. He had 1 day off on May 4th, resumed playing on May 5th, and has had very few days off until recently. 2 days off in June. Otherwise, from May 5th until the late part of August, pretty much an every single day player, which doesn't seem great given the form he's had at the plate, given how much his defense has slid. It's wild. Like, if you look at Anthony Volpe pre-injury, only played 33 games before that diving play that hurt his shoulder. He hit .233 with a .326 OBP and a .442 slug. It's a respectable line, right? You can accept that, especially for a good defender.
It's kind of what I thought he could do, It
Pop
may not
5
ever be good in
homers.
batting average, but
Yeah,
power, speed.
good enough OBP to play up in the lineup maybe against lefties and just go down against righties. 5 homers, 4 steals in 33 games. That's a 20 homer pace with similar number of steals. Like, that's good. Okay, 2020 guy, that's fine. In the time since the injury, it's 108 games since the injury. 197, 248, 378, 14 homers and 12 steals in 108 games, but just getting there in the most grinded out sort of way. Does this news give you the sort of confidence you need to say, okay, maybe I wasn't actually as wrong about Anthony Volpe as it seemed we all were for the better part of these last 4 months now?
Yeah, I feel like we've all been playing through a torn labrum this week.
Mhm.
I don't want to give excuses. In my tortured analogy, maybe there's some fixing that needs to be done for both. And I think what's hard about this is that should they have just gotten it fixed? Is there a fix? Is this going to require surgery? And if it requires surgery, you can't even necessarily depend on Anthony Volpe returning to form immediately next season, because the labrum is a tricky situation. It's just like it's not like you'd be like, oh, he's going to come back and have all the power he had before. We've seen other guys take a year, but after shoulder surgeries to really get back to form. Like, I'd still think that there is an above average everyday shortstop in the person of Anthony Volpe. I wonder if it's not going to happen until 2027. And by that time, you've been wrong for so long, you can't be right. So, I've moved Volpe out of more than a couple lineups for the rest of the time because of what's happening here. But you could also see, when you look at his rolling WOBA, you can see, that he's been pretty erratic for his career. I think this is him just trying to put together the different approaches he's had. He's had the ground ball approach, the fly ball approach. This year was actually looking like it could be one of the more consistent years early on. Even if you're looking at the WOBA chart right now, you can see this year at the beginning of the season, it was actually looking okay. And then right around May, it just sort of takes a dive down. He did have some resurgence in, I don't know what that is, July or something.
July, probably around the All-Star break, because he had a couple of days off and a cortisone shot, the first of his 2 cortisone shots. Like, I almost think
God, that's right there.
This chart
right
just
there
it aligns like so close to, this is when I got hurt, This is when I got a shot to start feeling better. This is when the shot wore off, and now I'm getting my second cortisone shot.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe he'll be okay through the but what do you do with this information for next year? You're like, especially if they don't do a fix, you're just like, I think then you have to bake that in as risk, And now you're talking about, okay, here's a guy who I think could hit 230 and go 20-20, but I'm adding in shoulder risk that if he doesn't get it fixed. And even if he does get it fixed, you're still adding in risk that he doesn't come back. So I think your projections for him, if once you include the risk, are for something like 230, 15-10 in 500 plate appearances, which all of a sudden is kind of tough in most formats.
That turns him into a mono league and maybe like a 15-team mixed league sort of player, if that's what it is. I'm trying to leave.
I'll probably still have draft and hold like third shortstop.
That's your third shortstop. I was thinking too. We had the Zach Neto injury last year,
and he came back. He came back bonkers off of that.
He had surgery, and I don't think they've ever specified the exact nature of his surgery. They did a really good job keeping a lid on that. But Neto's come back much better than I would have expected. It doesn't always work out. Every shoulder injury is different. Every person's different with the rehab. Still more questions than answers as it pertains to Volpe's future. But I do think if you are a Yankees fan, if you are a person that had Anthony Volpe on your team this season, you're saying, okay, I wasn't completely wrong for liking him in the first place, given how sharp that downturn was once this injury occurred. I'm surprised he hasn't had a stint on the IL, just given the circumstances. They're going to play a lot of Jose Caballero in the next few days, at least. Maybe they'll end up having to use Caballero some in the playoffs. That might have been a little bit of an overlooked addition for them mid-season. Caballero's a nice bench player.
I do remember when they picked him up being like, oh, God, this is not good news for Anthony Volpe. Because it's not that Jose Caballero is great. It's just that he's like a high-end utility guy that can play shortstop, That's just not when somebody when somebody spends resources on getting a utility guy that high end, it suggests to me that they're nervous about one of their everyday position players.
Yeah. So we'll see where it goes from here. We'll see if it's a few more days off. They publicly, at least, are saying they think Volpe can continue playing through this, but pointing back to what's happened since early May, you'd say he can play through it. Can he play well through it? That is a completely unanswered question for me. Caballero, we know he brings that speed skill set to the table. If you're looking for some late bags, deeper leagues especially, Caballero might be able to help you get those with a little bump in playing time.
I'm working on a theory that's only interesting to a couple of our listeners and maybe the deeper leaguer players, is that players we talk about 5 tools, and we know that like speed is a tool that does not correlate that well to major league success. However, it is one of the tools, and what I've found in undervalued guys that scratch out an ability in the major leagues is they do 2 or 3 things really well. And one of those a lot of times happens to be speed, right? So if you think about it, speed and glove, it may not make you an everyday player that most fantasy players care about, may not make you a guy that's a top end guy, but it may get you in the big leagues and get you a role, right? Mm-hmm. And if you can add speed and glove and one more tool, you can be like a back end starter utility guy. And what is Jose Caballero? Speed, glove, and maybe just a little bit of on base ability,
Mm-hmm.
So, that's, there are other guys, there are a ton of guys like sort of the Paul DeYoungs, right? Where it's speed or, glove and pop, so like the 2 and 3 tool guys are like, I think the truly undervalued players when it comes to prospecting, comes to guys who are coming up, that they carve out roles for themselves. This is, again, really only interesting to like 5% of our listeners. So that was just podcast gold right there.
Podcast gold. Yeah. Hey, you know what? They're not all hits. That's just the way. I've accepted that a long time ago. We're over 900 episodes into this pod. I'd love to tell you that they've all been hits, but they're just not. Sometimes we know while they're happening, we're like, uh-oh, this isn't this isn't the one. No.
The hot dog will save us today.
The hot dog. I feel like the hot dog, we're putting a lot of weight on the hot dog. And I mean, okay, just, it's been a bad week. Just a generally bad week, right? Protect your mental health is my only advice to our listeners out there. Do what it takes to feel good. Spend time with people you care about. Do things that help you relax because the world is heavy right now. And I thought the worst thing I was going to read all week in terms of bad news was Britt's story about 4 VPs and others affiliated with the Tigers being accused of misconduct toward women. I thought, like, okay, that's our bad story for the week.
That's
Britt
just
did a great
how we
job
started,
on that.
dude. That was just like
That was just an appetizer, right? And there's a pull quote in there that I just keep thinking about. This is from a current male employee in the organization. The dysfunction is woven into the culture. It feels like a bunch of guys who can do whatever they want. It's not a place women can feel safe. And this is about Illich Sports Entertainment broadly, which owns the Tigers, the Red Wings, Comerica Park, Little Caesars Arena where the Red Wings play. They have other entertainment entities too, but these are high-level employees that have done terrible things, reading Britt's story. And I think the really discouraging thing about it, aside from the actual details of the story itself, is it just feels like, what's next? Who's next? Which organization's next? This just seems like it's embedded in the fabric of many organizations, sports and otherwise, but it does seem especially pervasive in the sports world.
Yeah, I think the gross underbelly is, and I don't want to let the Tigers or this company off the hook, but the gross underbelly is that this is pretty pervasive in sports, and I try to be as supportive as possible to any women that want to work in the space, and a lot of times it ends up being just like listening to their horror stories, you know, and you know, like I've had friends that you went by like gender neutral versions of their first name just to get someone to look at their, you know, these are small transgressions, but it's like, you know, it's that pervasive where it's just like, you know, little things that they just have to deal with all the time, little comments. You know, there's the Tinder culture is pretty intense among the players and executives. And so you're going to hear, even if it's not directed at you yourself, you're just going to hear a lot of stuff about, you know, who shagged who and, you know, stuff that's like borderline, you know. And I know that this is, I'm not trying to lump that into these, you know, allegations are worse, but I'm trying to make a point that it's pretty pervasive. And I've heard some pushback of like, well, this wasn't the Tigers. I think it's irrelevant, you know, like it's the company that owns the Tigers. It's, you know, it's in sports. It's connected to the Tigers. That's the way into this as a baseball story, you know? And the other pushback I've heard is like, oh, what happens in the locker room? This is not the locker room. We're not talking about the locker room anymore. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar business. You know, this is a business. And if you're going to start taking certain businesses and being like, oh, this is a man space. This business is a man space. Well, how could women come into this man space and say anything? Then you're just shutting doors and just being, oh, this whole industry is not one we want you in. Like, that just seems ridiculous. Plus, it's so short-sighted because if you want to sell your sport, if you just want to cut off 50% of the people that you want to sell the sport to, right? Because what happens internally is going to float out. It's going to float out into what decisions you make for marketing, how you broadcast yourself as a sport. If those are the people that are running your company, then they're not going to run it in a way that seems that attractive on the field or in the stadium to women. And so you're just like, you just like cut off half of your potential income. So it's like not good business to run your business.
Yeah, and more importantly, it's just bad.
It's also just like
humanity, just a terrible
it's
way
just
to be.
Not good to people, but it's also bad business. So it's like you're being dumb. Like, this is not. And baseball, I think there's a problem underneath. And I appreciate Katie and Britt for reporting these stories because you're shining a light on this. It's difficult. You're going to get a lot of blowback, a lot of people yelling at you. And it's also difficult from like a legal standpoint to put these stories out there. But I remember the Craig Monroe stuff coming out. And the weird part about this was I remember reading about it and being like, oh, this is awful. and then it just didn't go anywhere.
Mm.
So I'm glad this story sort of lifted that back up again, just to be like, hey, what happened to this? Like, why is law enforcement sitting on their hands on this one? But in general, much too pervasive in the sport.
Yeah, and I think people may remember the former assistant GM of the Tigers, Sam Mezen, resigning earlier this year amidst an investigation into his conduct too, right? So it's been a lot around this organization, and I will go back to what you were saying earlier. It's not just the Tigers. We're not letting the Tigers off the hook by saying that. Just saying like, the next story probably isn't that far away because there are plenty of them out there, and it takes a lot of courage, people working in sports, women in sports, to come forward and talk about this too and be a part of these stories. So I'm glad Britt, Katie Strang do such great work on that front, and hopefully we'll have more reporters digging into these stories and shining a light on this because it is a pervasive problem in sport. On to some other news, actually some mailbag questions instead. This is an interesting one from Lou Gleich, frequent Discord commenter. Lou wants to know if we're adjusting expectations for Rays hitters with the return to the Trop. And I think he called out the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. home run spike from the year that the Jays spent between Dunedin and Buffalo, right? Like that was a big outlier from a home run perspective. And looking at the home road splits for Rays hitters, do we have any concerns about the likes of Junior Caminero with the expected return to the pitcher-friendly Trop in 2026?
I mean, obviously, yes, I had been focusing on the positive. I'm trying to focus on the positive more in my life. And so I had been focusing on how I think Shane Baz will be a bit of a sleeper next year going to the drafts. If you look at his home-away splits, they are incredible. Plus, he's been trying to find that third pitch, trying to find that arsenal. He has a good two-pitch mix. So I've been focusing on that. I think Pepio will take even another step forward next year. So, that had been sort of where I'd been at in my head. I had, of course, not thought of the other side of this, which, if you look at the StatCast park factors for Steinbrenner Field, they do augment home runs the most, but it's still a 105 park factor for hits. I mentioned that because Junior Caminero has an 86 WRC plus away from home. He has a 201, 243 OBP, 456 slug away from home. And so I think it'd be tempting to be like, oh God, he's terrible away from home. He's going to be terrible next year. However, he still had 20 home runs on the road. And a 105 park factor at home does not explain a 180 BABIP for Junior Caminero on the road. So I think you still have to take these with a grain of salt because it is a smaller sample. It is 296 plate appearances filled with noise of its own. And I'm happy to see that he didn't just have, 30 home runs at home and 10 on the road. That would actually bother me more than this current line. So I don't think Junior Caminero is going to hit 201 next year. I actually don't think that when you look at his skill set that there's that much to be nervous about in terms of batting average. He has a 19.7% K rate. He hits the snot out of the ball. He's not yet slow. And so, I don't think he was going to necessarily hit 42 homers again next year. But a 261 average seems totally fine, and I don't think the change in venues is going to hurt him that much. Is there somebody else that you've circled? I guess John Ferrando was great on the road. Yandy's great in the question.
The road, Yandy's got 17 homers at home, only 6 on the road. So Yandy Diaz,
but you don't buy him for homers. So I don't know. I think his projection for next year will be for a 290 average and 15 homers again. I don't. And I think he can probably get to that. He has 6 homers on the road. He's had 300 on the road. I mean,
but he popped 22 2 years ago in 2023. So I think people could get a little bit tricked by it.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a possible trick in there. Brandon Lau, I don't even know if he'll be a Ray next year, and he has great numbers on the road. Josh Lowe. Yeah, I don't know. It's an ongoing thing for me with Josh Lowe. I probably will still take more bites from off the Josh Lowe apple again next year, but just for cheaper again, just now he'll be my 5th outfielder or 4th outfielder, I still like the skill set. If you what do you see when you my Josh Lowe glasses are broken. I see a 27-year-old who hits the ball decently hard and runs well and makes okay contact. Like he seems at least average or above average in most facets of the game. Am I wrong? What am I missing?
I see a 2020 guy that probably can't play against lefties, so his counting stats are going to be a little lighter than the typical 2020 guy. That's what I see.
Yeah, that's probably it.
That plays, and you're going to have some weeks in weekly leagues where you're not as excited to play him because maybe they'll catch 3 lefties or something. But generally, I think my glasses might be broken too, but I actually see Lowe as this is the guy we've kind of expected him to be. I don't think there's one more level for him to reach. Probably going to be discounted though next year. So
I guess I did buy him with the expectation like I think he could be 2020, but like could things break right and they play him every day and he's got more volume than we expect, and maybe he has like a peak season where it's like 30-30, and I guess that's harder to see now, and maybe there's just maybe only like a 2% chance of that. And so don't buy him, I guess, as a sleeper next year. Buy him as an undervalued, asset that still has value.
Yeah, and I think to kind of talk about it from a more broad perspective, I do think the likes of Boz, some of the pitchers there that maybe haven't been as good as we expected this year. I can't think if there's not really that many. Drew Rasmussen's been great. McClanahan's been hurt. Like where else are there bounce back pitchers in that group? I do think it's going to be accounted for in the projections because the projections know how the Trop plays, so it'll be baked in accordingly there. So if you see some things that are a little surprising on the power front, that would probably be an explanation for why. If you see some Rays pitchers that are projected to be a lot better, have rebounds, that's going to be baked in there too.
I suppose some people, Aranda was great on the road, but that's only his actual results. And he had such a breakout at 27 that included power that we didn't expect. I suppose Aranda could be slightly overvalued in drafts next year.
Yeah, maybe. I think there's also a lefty-righty thing with him, too. He hasn't had the struggles against lefties this year the way that Josh Lowe has, but all the power, for the most part, comes against righties from Jonathan Aranda. So could be a little bit of a tricky player in the same formats. We'll
do a lot of building the bench next year, and we'll always get stuck on the Tampa build-a-bench, and we'll always get stuck on, because somebody in Tampa has to play every day, and it seems like nobody is the answer. But that's not possible.
Junior, Yandy, there's your first 2.
Yeah,
maybe Chandler Simpson, Carson Williams. See, we're not doing it today. No. There'll be no Rays build a bench right now.
We got the whole offseason.
Yeah. There was one other question in Discord. This came from Jude. We were talking about Roki Sasaki, and Trevor brought up blowing up a guy's confidence. Jude wants to know: do teams have more personnel in place now to help players when they're grinding mentally? Is this a thing that's become maybe we can find one good thing teams are doing on the flip side of our conversation from earlier? Are there more resources available internally for players when they are going through any sort of mental issue?
Yes, there are. I think every team has a team psychologist. I think there's a question of is it a performance? Is it that person in the performance department, or is that person more in the healthcare department, like the trainer department? Because it might be easier to sell certain teams on the idea of like, oh, we need somebody to go out there and optimize their mindset on the mound, So that's a little bit more about coping mechanisms on the mound and like how they can think about things and the winner's mindset and stuff like that. I think that might be a little bit more common than someone who's acts more like a therapist and can talk to you about your issues and help you that way. That might be in the trainer department. Might be someone who's more concerned with your mental health as it comes to daily, as opposed to how it will translate to sports success and like make you a better player. And I think both are super important. And again, it's one of those things where you can do the right thing for the person as a player, and it could be good business sense, right? Because you help that person avoid the pitfalls that makes them end up in the wrong place and keeps them on the mound. And, it may not be like, how do I help you dominate in the physical space on the mound? It might be, maybe I can just help you not fall into a spiral, mentally that personally that ends up in these other bad places where you end up in the news for the wrong reasons, right? So I would personally have both. And I think I would have them be different people and maybe even in different departments, as I've suggested. A sports, like a sort of a psychologist of like that helps you with mindset on the mound. That's maybe, I don't know what department that's in, but that's, and then another one that's more in the sort of healthcare aspect. Both. Make sure to know that everyone knows that they can't share what you talk to with them with other members of other departments. I think it's a little bit more common. It's, I've been pretty tight. I've been pretty far inside with some teams, and they had those people. So I think it's really important. Also, a GM once told me that they've studied the value of a reset, the idea of like sending someone to the minors to find their confidence, and that they found something positive in it. But I do think that is set against, like, no player wants to go back to the minor leagues. And some players will not refine their confidence in the minor leagues because they think they're major leaguers and whatever they do in the minor leagues is irrelevant, And so you do have to be careful with how you do that reset. Do you do it in a minor league session where they're like, oh, yeah, I can dominate? Or is that going to be irrelevant to that player? And so instead you give them 2 or 3 days off and you find a mental health break where you call up an ONKC or, you know what it is, whatever it is. Like there are teams do think about this. So I think increasingly they're thinking about it. I think that some teams obviously don't think about it at all. And it's probably part of how they fall behind.
Again, yeah, it depends on who's running the organization, coaching staff up to the front office, how they see value in it. But I imagine it has a ton of potential if you do it well and do it right. And it's good that it's becoming a more common part of the game to have those resources available. And hopefully the stigma of using those resources has also started to erode over time too. I imagine, depending on how it's structured, if that's where I feel like the separate departments thing you're talking about is a little bit tricky, because it's like if one is almost like adjacent to the coaching staff, and it's cool, you went to the person who's adjacent to the coaching staff. Oh no, you went to the other person who's like upstairs.
Oh, right,
like,
yeah.
So
then there's a stigma attached to like, you're crazy.
Right,
you just went to the guy who helps you dominate on the mound.
Yeah, I think that
but
that
maybe
could be a little
just
bit
having
weird.
both, just like, hey, maybe you get a little bit of value of going to the guy who's just trying to get you to dominate on the mound because he thinks it gets you start thinking about your mental health in ways. Maybe that makes you more likely to go to the other person later. Maybe it reduces the stigma to have the therapist that is more about mound presence and text you about like your coping mechanisms on the mound. Maybe that reduces the stigma because you're like, oh, that's one shrink and there's another shrink, and maybe over time that distinction goes away. But you're right. That is part of it. That is part of it. Which one did you go to? And there's like a distrust that comes from players with organizations where they're like, what'd you say? Like, don't be a snitch, or like whatever it is, like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An organization hired, or there's still, the confidentiality, all those things would still apply, but I imagine it'd be closer. It'd be closer to going to like an HR person. It would feel more like that than going outside to get separate help. So it really depends on the issues. But good question, Jude. Appreciate you bringing it up. And
I do know that the people who are in these roles, and I've seen this, will like almost often make a like daily joke about how they cannot say anything to anybody else about what you talked about. Like they make it part of their like sort of daily joking, just so that everybody knows that's their stance. Like,
right, it's safe. Like you can't. It's not getting out. So
yeah. So it is difficult because they just sort of assume that anything they might say to someone who's an employee on the team will be used against them eventually. So
right.
The people who are in these roles have to like be like, no. As I've told you a million times, hey, it says on the sticker, like, nope, I can't tell anybody what we talk about. It's just sort of, they have to kind of make an almost joke about it to make sure that like everybody knows that that they're serious about it.
Yeah,
that they're not going to tell anybody what you talk to them about.
Got to break down those barriers as best you can. Thanks again for that question, Jude. Let's get to a few weekend waiver targets. Eno had a great debut earlier this week from Connolly Early. Yet another young starter breaking through for the Red Sox and maybe having a really important role for them over the final 3+ weeks of the season.
Yeah, and I was trying to do player comps on the craft with Nick Pollock, and I was, kind of going through basically a process that should be comfortable for anybody who listens to Rates and Barrels. Is, sort of start with the arm angle. You start with the arm angle, and then you kind of look at player movements. I didn't have the arm angle for early when I did it, and so I thought maybe David Peterson with more velocity and more control. However, David Peterson has a 41-degree arm angle. So I'm putting up a comp here that's a 31-degree arm angle for early. He's on the left. A 34 on the right. As you can see, the velos are pretty close. You're talking about a 94-mile-an-hour sinker, 94.5 for our comp. 94, 94 plus on the four seam, at least for early on the left. I'll give you a hint. The person on the right this is their reliever version of themselves. They have been a starter in the past. So this is early comping to a former starter that is now a reliever. And he also has a better four seam than the person we're comping him to. So that's a clue that this player is not super highly well regarded, and people might be mad about the comp. But do you have any ideas?
94.5 on the sinker. Throws it almost
recently
60%
converted
of the time.
to relieving.
Recently
basically
converted.
This year, last year has kind of been.
Is that
between.
Steven Matz?
Yes, I
did not know that going in, but yeah, the recently converted thing and the velo and okay, yeah. I mean, Steven Matz is interesting.
Matz doesn't have a great four seam, but he did throw more four seams when he was a starter, and he threw more of those gyro sliders when he's healthy. So that's my caveat: is early looks like a healthy version of Steven Matz, and you're comparing him to the bullpen. And he has a better four seam. So, like Matt's plus. Now, if that sounds like I'm being really mean, just have to remember Matt's had a lot of upside. He had some good years. He was more well regarded when he was younger. So, like, I'm trying to just find someone he's like that he could be better than. He has a better four seam. He's showing similar velocity when Matt's is in the pen and early is in the rotation. And you're just hoping that he doesn't have the injury issues that Matz has, that he has better command, that he can throw the slider more often. But I just wanted to put you in the ballpark of somebody who's existed before that has had some success. And I actually don't think this is that mean of a comp. I think like if you're saying, oh, he could be Matz but better, then like, hey, all right, I'll take it.
A better Steven Matz. Yeah, I think that could work. I think the interesting thing with early, gets a 2-start week next week. Gets the A's at home, and he gets the Rays at Steinbrenner Field. So even if you say, oh, I think maybe it is Steven Matz long term. Well, it's a 2-start week from a guy that's probably good enough to get that opportunity right away. We saw 11 Ks in the debut over 5 innings. Like that's going to play. So I think you take that chance. And from a workload perspective, are we looking at anything that would give us concern about him maybe not making that second start?
I don't think so. I mean, he had 103 innings in 2024, and he had 100 this year in the minors. So he is pitching in uncharted territory, but like not by much, but like 2 innings. So I think they can give him that. I do think that, maybe Tolley and early in the playoffs become more kind of like bullpen pieces that they used, because you can field a threesome of starters on the Boston Red Sox for a series that is all veterans that has done this before, and still have Tolley and early to like bring in the third or fourth if things don't work out, right? Like if it's a bad Giolito start, take a Giolito out early because you got Tolley in early, and if Bayo, goes through 3 or 4 clean, but it hasn't looked amazing, and he's allowed people on in every inning. Hey, this is the time for Toley and early, So I do think next year the 5-man rotation includes Toley and early.
Yeah, cool. Good sign for Boston to get both of those guys in. I think there's pretty decent ceiling on both. Toley is actually into a new career high range for innings on the season. I think he's about 20 over what he did last year at TCU, and that's a couple innings less than what he threw at Wichita State the year before, but he's still usable.
And he was kind of workhorsey in college. I think that might be something.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, he had 85 innings, I think, 2 years in a row in college. Like,
yeah, 85 and 2/3, and then 81 and a third.
That's pretty good for college. So you're not also taking a guy who like was in the 30s and 50s and 60s and blowing him up to 130. You're taking a guy who was in the 80s, and then he got to the hundreds, and now he's, in the mid hundreds. I do think that's part of why they'll be in the bullpen in the playoffs. But I do think they can finish the season. And I know Toley's beginning hasn't been that great, but I actually kind of like him a little better than early because it's just standout stuff. And I think he'll settle down. I think there's been a little bit of he has like crazy mound presence too. So I think he's been like pretty like adrenalined out. Early looked a little bit more composed. I think in terms of just his debut and like how it worked out, Toley, I think, is still riding pretty high on adrenaline, but I think the stuff is better for Toley. And I talked about this in the craft, but in case they don't, our listeners don't listen to those, I just want to point out that Toley is very interesting because if you look at where his arm angle is and you look at where his movement is, they don't line up. And that may have something to do with early adrenaline and some of his command issues. I think he'll settle down because he's thrown this way for a while. But he basically has the same arm angle as Connor as early. It's 31, 32, 33, somewhere in there. But he has the movement of an over-the-top guy. So he's very interesting. And the closest I could not find a comp for Toley. And the closest I could find was maybe Crochet or a Kikuchi with better long-term command. But either way, it wasn't a perfect comp.
Yeah, exciting though. If even if the comps are imperfect, to have those as maybe your bookends potentially. Some other pitchers to look at if you're in a situation, shallow league, maybe Mackenzie Gore is back. He's available about 20% of CBS leagues. He took the loss against Miami in his first start back, went 5 innings though, 2 earned, 4 Ks. Ryan Weathers actually got the win on the other side. He also came back from the IL, only needed 68 pitches. And Gore gets Atlanta at home for the next start, so it's not like a must-start everywhere situation.
And
but it's
in the
usable.
Miami start, despite coming back, the velo trend is still obvious. It was
still down.
The worst velo of his season.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe pick him up and wait. If you're going to pick someone up and wait, I think you pick up Weathers. Don't use him in Colorado necessarily, but then use him for the remaining starts after that because he's just looked like a different guy going back to last year despite a bunch of injuries that have cost him time.
And he came back with pretty good velocity. The start before he got injured, it was 95, and that was no good. But he was 97s to start the season. So he's in between a little bit with the 96.5. But 96.5 is better than 95.2. That's really good velo. 96.5 for a lefty. The comp for me, and this is a little bit less based on arm angle or even stuff, but the comp for me a little bit with Ryan Weathers is Luzardo. And it's more about a little bit inconsistency, throw in some slightly poor fastball shape, but good velo, right? And is good when the velo is high, but also feels like you're dancing on the razor's edge a little bit. That's the feeling I get from Weathers, is a little bit of a Luzardo comp there.
Not bad though. If you can deal with the ups and downs in the home park, will I think maybe bring some of that closer to a median outcome on a regular basis. I think Citizens Bank Ballpark can maybe amplify some of the downside of Jesus Luzardo.
Yeah, but hey, for how everyone sort of jumped off the Luzardo train at some point, it's been a fine season. Right?
I mean, rough first inning last night and then settled down for a while, and Phillies came back and got a big win. They have 11 games on the Mets now in the NL East. Is that real?
That's crazy.
Just it's absolute turnaround. Like just a
that one's done.
Massive week. Yeah, that one went from they could come back to it's over.
Yep.
Joey Cantillo, 8 scoreless against the Royals earlier this week. Still available in about 80% of CBS leagues. He's pitched really well since getting back into the mix for the Guardians. I think that was at the time of the Ortiz suspension in July. He's kind of stretched out and just looked increasingly effective and getting it done with a pretty good strikeout rate too. So I'm curious what you make of Cantillo coming off of a really nice stretch for about 2 months now.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of him. I know that I don't have to worry so much about the lack of a great breaking ball with a lefty that has a really good changeup. So, you can throw out some of the, but is his breaking ball good analysis, I think. The other thing that I'm just having a little bit of trouble with personally is, you look at something like the prospects grade. He had a 35 on the command from Fangraphs. And you look at just some sort of top line numbers for Joey Cantillo, and you see some pretty elevated walk rates in the minors. I don't think we're talking about sort of Edward Cabrerian levels, but you got to look close at times. It's more like sort of 11 to 13%. There's some 15s in there. Definitely, you could see where the command gate came from. And then you look at the major leagues, and he's got a 99 location plus last year and 103 location plus this year. So are we talking about like a Hunter Brown situation where the prospect grades and the subjective evaluation, even the walk rates, are missing something about his abilities? Like, does he have like maybe just the Snellian thing where he just doesn't give in and he's willing to take the walk to not give up the homer? What am I missing? And I would love to hear. I know we have a couple of really dedicated Guardians fans in the Discord and among our listenership, and I'd love to hear what they see. Watching Cantillo a little bit more than I do. I've seen him. I've seen the great changeup, but there's something maybe about watching him start in and start out that you might get something that I've missed in terms of the command grades, the this year location plus if you just look at K-BB for Cantillo, and you even look at the changeup stuff grade, and you look at some of the results, I think you would be pretty positive about him next year. But I'm more nervous. And for the rest of this year, I'm willing to just say, hey, if the schedule's good, go with him. But I am interested in gaining more information from people who watch him more often. When I make my evaluations for next year and for keeper status and things like that.
Yeah, at Detroit, reasonably tough matchup coming up this week, but
I think I'd throw him in that.
Probably in. I think the thing about Cantillo you should know, if you glance at the Savant page and you don't happen to see the extension slider, you see the velo, 91.5. It's not really that great of velocity. It's like 99 percentile extension. So I'm less worried about the fastball velocity because of that. It only throws that four-seamer about 40% of the time. I kind of think this works. Nothing moves the way you'd expect. I mean, it's a 53-degree arm angle, so very much an over-the-top lefty
with a really good
big-time
changeup.
extension.
It's a very strange. It's a very strange combination of things for sure.
Yeah, it might just be weird enough to work for a little while. It's not an every start sort of situation, but he's pitched really well. Thought he deserved a mention. We've got a few playing time jumps on the hitter side. I don't see anything in the must add category for bats right now. Maybe it'll change between now and Sunday. I think we're at the point in the year now. You're just chasing the opportunities that are being afforded to players where injuries have just created a surplus.
One name jumps off this, and I almost wanted like take a screenshot of this and throw up what you have on the rundown. Like, do you have something where you can like show
you got Jack Caglione? Is that
that's the name? Because like, I was looking at this and I was like, dude, we don't really have to talk about a lot of these guys.
That's how I felt about it. It's why it's the last part of this segment, because it just doesn't.
Let me see what you have here. I mean, do you have like Jimmy Crooks and Jorge Alfaro.
Two catcher league. Yeah.
Nick York, Richie Palacios, Chris Taylor, Oswald Peraza, Otto Camp, Cam Devaney, Edmund De Sosa, Drew Gilbert. There's a little something here for me. I need to have a conversation with him. He's excited to have this, but we didn't have the time. He would have the flattest swing in baseball if he qualified. And he told me something about like, yeah, I've tried to change it, and then I just stopped trying to change it. So there could be, I don't know, there's something, and he also plays with his hair on fire. That's the thing about Drew Gilbert is like he's on all the social medias where they have that celebration where Matt Chapman's like choking him at the end. So, he's a crazy person, and I think I may like him a little bit at that sort of like a 15-team fifth outfielder, last keeper in the really deep leagues, sixth outfielder in drafting holds next year. I know it's really edge case.
That's a notch below Dale and Lyle though, right?
I think actually sort of right there with Dale.
Same tier.
Like, there's some things he does well, but the upside's not really good. The park is worse. So I guess he'd be behind Dale and Lyle, but he's somewhere in there. But Jack is just somebody I like. If he's a terrible and everyone thinks he's terrible, and next year, he's going, as the like 20th first baseman or, the 90th outfielder or whatever, like I am all in. And even if the prices are higher than that, like there's something I really like about it. I don't, Zips has a 190 projection on him for batting average. I honestly do not know where that's coming from. That is weighting the 187 plate appearances in the major leagues way too much, in my opinion. Like I do not understand that at all. Everything else is more 250s with like a 175 to 200 ISO. That's a good player.
It's kind of funny though, because Gilbert fits into the same boat for me as like Victor Mesa Jr., in that he's a former prospect, guy we were excited about once, who has lost a lot of the luster on his way to the big leagues, but now he's there and he's playing, and that's enough to matter. And I think Mesa actually just hit his first big league homer earlier this week. Pretty good plate skills early on. K rates haven't been that bad in the upper levels of the minors. Like I feel like Miami just continues to churn through interesting enough guys. There's a little bit of the San Francisco from a couple of years ago approach where it's like, all right, we got these internal guys.
We'll give you 3 weeks.
Let's just see what you look like. Let's just give you a chance and see if it works.
We'll give you a month and we'll DFA you if we try the next guy.
In that way, I think Gilbert and Victor Mesa Jr. and even George Valera in Cleveland are all a little bit similar. I just wish
Victor Mesa Jr. stole bases. The way I see it now is he looks kind of like a 240, like 15-15 guy without the second 15.
Yeah, they had a 60 speed grade on him at Fangraphs in 2024. So
But he just hasn't been stealing bases unless, maybe there's been some injuries or.
Yeah.
He's 24, so he's not young anymore. Not like young in the standpoint of like a prospect or anything. So I do think that there's not that much upside here, but he's going to be the type of player that's going to be really important when we start building benches and thinking about what lineups look like for next year. Because if he's, like a fourth outfielder in Miami, like he will be relevant in some leagues next year. And we've seen that injury can happen and make these kind of players like pretty indispensable. So I don't think that. The only ones that really fell out, that really came off that list though for me was Jack. I think that's the guy who can turn into a regular, above average regular, and I think there's still like a 5 to 10% superstar in him. This is not enough for me to jump off the Jack train.
Yeah, if you need a little power help down the stretch, worth taking a chance. I think now that he's back off the IL, they're going to keep playing him nearly every day because they need that boost in Kansas City from Jack Caglione.
Yeah, and then Drew's playing over his head a little bit power-wise, but what if he does? Because he's just an insane person. And I mean that in the nicest way possible.
The nicest way, yeah. No, it was, yes, parentheses.
Yeah.
Supportive.
Yes. Yeah, positive. Right. Yeah.
Now it is our pleasure to be joined by our senior hot dog correspondent, back after a 2-week hiatus. Niv Shah is here. Niv, how are you doing?
Great. How you doing, Derek? How are we doing, Eno?
Happy it's Friday.
Okay.
Yeah,
Friday.
ready to turn the page, ready to move on and just try and keep moving forward, right? And look,
Sounds great.
I think it's going to be fun. We're going to talk about a new hot dog you get to try at Nats Park, Taste of the Majors, maybe delivered again from a flavor perspective. Visuals, maybe a little work to be done there. We'll get to the dog in a little bit. The Miami Dog is going to be featured this week. We got an Ottoneu topic, and it goes beyond Ottoneu. I think it's a general keeper dynasty league sort of thing where there's any sort of a bidding component on free agents. How do you handle late season pickups as a non-contending team when you have contenders throwing extra bucks to just fill any possible hole versus you as a team looking more to the future, trying to get players at a keepable price? So that's sort of the main strategic question that we're going to wrestle with here. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the specific players that are being bid on right now. Eno and I talked about Connolly early, a little bit early in the show, but that didn't mean to make that. It's just his name.
Nah, it happened though. We have to embrace it.
There's nothing you can do. I think there is that constant tension, though, because you see guys on this list. Early's definitely one of them. Dalen Lyle, I think, is becoming an exciting player for some folks out there. There's a lot of things he could do that could be valuable from a fantasy perspective. Even Joey Cantillo, you could see longer-term value there. Tyler Wells getting a chance down the stretch here for the Orioles, probably a part of their plan next year. What are you finding is generally the sweet spot bid-wise for teams looking more to the future, right? Ordinarily, Tyler Wells mid-season might go for $1 or $2. This time of year, he's probably going to go for a little bit more, and he doesn't even have the prospect juice of someone like Connolly Early, who's going to be, I think, a lot more exciting to everybody in the league.
Yeah, we started this conversation in like sort of the Ottoneu Slack and community around Jonah Tong. That was like sort of the first guy. And then Peyton Toll? Am I saying that right? Peyton Tolley. Yeah. He came up, and those guys, like after that first start, all of a sudden it's like must secure. And Connolly Early is the next guy on that sort of like chain of players. And there's sort of a split view here, and I'm going to just say what the split is, and then I'll say what I sort of stand on this. There's some people that are like, look, if I have him at whatever price it is, I have the option for 2-3 more starts. I can see if he's worth that price, and I can cut him at the end of the season, and then I know he's available at the preseason auction next year. So I know, I have him through the whole offseason. I can trade him maybe, but the result of that, well, I mean, I'll give myself away here, but the other way of looking at it is saying, like, what is his value and what is something that he's keepable at? When we're talking about these kind of starters with good pedigree, I don't think it's irrational to spend $4 or $5, even after just one major league start, just because we already know, in the case of Tong, Early, and Tolley, really, but Tong and Early were like on my radar even before this late season push. Those guys have pedigree. They're going to get chances certainly next year, if not through the rest of this year. So $4 or $5, maybe get them at 6 to 7, maybe even 8 next year. I could see that being like, that's your fourth starter. It's not the worst way to spend money. That's sort of the way that I would approach it. Obviously, it's sort of a prisoner's dilemma where if anyone takes the maximal approach, he's not going to be on your roster, right? We're seeing, I saw a Connolly Early auction that ended yesterday that went for $29, which is, and you can be maximal and you can say, I have this option, but the downside is like, look, like there's nothing Connolly Early can do
to become worth $29.
Yeah,
there's
not in 3 more big league starts and maybe some time in the playoffs. It's not going to happen.
In no scoring system can you say I'm going to keep him for $31 next year, right? That's just like impossible. That's
there
like,
are really
George
3 to
Kirby
5
price.
pitchers. There's like 3 to 5 pitchers you would keep at $30.
Yeah,
in most
yeah.
of
I
your
mean,
formats?
it's maybe like top 15, depending on the league and the age, but like it's not way further than that. And even if he will be a top 15 pitcher next year, which I know I'm taking a huge jump to say that, I'm not saying it. I'm just saying.
Well, that you can't keep him at that price and assume he will be. Like you have to
Right.
keep him at something else and be happy that he does become a top 15 guy.
Right. You need upside, especially with guys like this. They just don't have enough of a proven record, right? So, I think you want to try to bid at a price where you're happy to keep. I think when you
and I think even if you're a contender, you should think a little bit about that, because if you're a contender and you do spend the $29 to kind of block anybody else from getting him, and this is maybe it's head to head, and you don't want somebody to have a great starter. And Robert Sanchez always, in our league, always keeps a bunch of money around so that he can block certain
he can push
moves.
Yeah.
So you can't get like a, oops, I'm gonna start short this week, I'm gonna buy this guy, and then he's like, nope, blocked you.
Right.
And so even if you do that, like you're not gonna keep him. I think that head to head is like a little bit of a different beast, but in most situations,
is the one place if you're playing in a head to head and you have like a games cap or an innings cap that you're running up against or you're short of, and your opponent sees that, I could see your opponent really blocking you there, and that being like a pretty good move.
Spending a bunch of money just to get that guy and be like, this is it. I mean, if I don't get him, I'm going to lose this week, and then I'm out.
Right.
So that's one thing.
We had that with a different pitcher earlier in the year where he, I think it was maybe even Tong, where like I was like, I'm fine with, me and Chad were talking, we're like maybe $6, maybe $8, and he goes for $20, and the reason you do that is because you're in the playoffs and you're like, I need another starting pitcher.
Yeah.
And that putting that logic aside, I think you really want to bid. The other thing is that, a lot of people will say, it's the end of the season. I have all this extra money. What else am I going to use it on if not burning it on these guys? And coming back to the league, that we share, Corey Seager got cut. Mookie Betts got cut. Trey Turner just got cut. Like, if you have money, then you can. If you have money,
pick up a star
and then
less.
And if someone else, say someone else adds that Trey Turner, that's going to shake something loose, right? Like that's another dynamic at the end of especially auto new leagues where people start securing keepers for their offseason. And if you're in the playoffs and you have Trey Turner and he's out for the rest of the regular season, I can understand why you'd want to cut him. Corey Seager, same kind of thing, but or Mookie Betts, who you had at like $70 or $65, who just didn't play that level. And so down here in the contender zone, I can blow $20 on Connolly early, or I can like play my cards right. And now we have Corey Seager and Mookie Betts for next year. We had to cut some stuff to get there, but like that's what the money can also get you. The money doesn't simply live and die with top 10 pitching prospects, right? So
yeah, and I think even if I was a contender and I was in a non-head-to-head situation and I was looking at Connie early and I was like, well, I have $20 and I could just do this. I think it'd be better if you won him. Maybe you are a top-end guy, but you get him at 6, because if he's a keeper for you and you've got expensive other players, like you could still trade Conley early and an expensive guy for a cheaper guy, or you know what I mean? Like it's still just more valuable in the offseason.
It just makes him it makes him an asset, right? That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Like, it makes him an asset. And I totally agree with that. Like I think having a guy who is just not an asset on your roster, you might as well just cut him in November after arbitration ends. Like there's not a ton of value to that.
I have a $15 Bo Bichette and a $41 Austin Riley, and I think I'm headed toward the finals, and I'm probably going to try and keep the Bichette because that seems keepable. That seems like an asset.
I think that's,
but the $41 Austin Riley is actually just it's FAB.
$20. It's $20.
Yeah, it's actually just $20 I can spend somewhere. Just waiting for the right moment.
Yeah, right. But that's really valuable. And then, again, I'm not saying like Austin Riley's a little bit of a different thing because of the way his year went, but you could be sitting there and looking at the Conley early auction that just started in that league and say, well, I have $20. What am I going to do with that? And it could be get Austin Riley in like 3 days. If you just like sort of look at the whole, the whole league and like what else could happen. But at the same time, nothing is as exciting as a pitching prospect. So it's hard to, or like a
young
prospect
pitching
in general.
prospect that like could turn into something amazing.
Yeah, everyone could turn into someone amazing, right? And then it's like,
and I feel like pitchers will tell you faster too. Like a hitter, you know, like think about Wyatt Langford. Like, you know, how do we feel about Wyatt Langford now? We still don't know. You know, and we've gotten lots of plate appearances.
We thought we were really positive on him, and then
and then we thought we were kind of negative on him, and then he's had a really good second half. So it's kind of like he's pretty good, you know. But like, and I feel like a
hitters,
pitcher can kind of go 5 starts, and you're like, holy crap, this is a dude.
Yeah, this guy can shove. Yeah. It's a big difference. And it is exciting, and it's hard not to say, no matter what, I want to root for this guy for the next 3 weeks because my season's over and that's all I want to do. But if you end up with like, $20+ early, like you can't trade that. You can't really keep it. So no matter how good he could not give up a hit the rest of the season. You still probably can't keep him at 20. Well.
If he was that, I mean, in a dream scenario where he's just cruising like 5+ every single time out, gets a bunch of wins, K rate looks good, gives up like 1 or 2 runs over 3 starts, then maybe someone's keeping him in the $20
like
range.
15,
I probably wouldn't.
Yeah,
it still seems like you've taken all the possible part, like the profit out of next year by getting him at that price, right? And that's where this exercise gets so interesting. And I had something come up it was a non-auto new league. It was Spencer Strider, who was available in my league a couple weeks ago. I'm trying to win right now, but I also could see keeper value. So I was trying to thread the needle of being aggressive enough to get him without overpaying. Like that was a weird sort of
creating an asset, right?
Yeah, like both. Like that's even if he wasn't going to be a keeper for me, maybe he's a trade piece for me in the winter. I wanted him at a tradable price. Yeah. And I wanted to still have fab left for later. Really wanted to have my cake and eat it too.
Did you win?
Did $17.
That might be it.
In a 16-team league, that might be keepable.
No, that's nice at 16-team league. That's nice in a big league.
I think September is underrated in keeper leagues that use fab though as a great time to make additions because injured players have been cut. Underperformers that are expiring contracts get cut in a lot of leagues, and they're sitting out there. And if you held on to fab, which to me is a little bit more of a broader strategy in keeper leagues, I don't think it's the same as in redraft where it's like, spend it early, right? It's just a big water slide, like the spending trends. It's 3-digit bids early, and then $50 to $70 bids mid-season, and then you're like $5 to $10 bids.
But a keeper leagues, that number is attached to that player, going forward. So
So I tend to be a lot more conservative in my bidding when it comes to a keeper league early in the year. Like I'll throw a bunch of 1s and 3s out there, but I rarely throw a double-digit bid. This is a $100 league in particular, but it's usually a single percentage of my fab budget that I'm spending per player throughout the first half.
And generally, I can't say that I'm a super successful on a new player, but this strategy I think has felt pretty good for my teams, which is I spend August and September on my teams on non-contenders building my next, my team for next year. Yeah. I don't really want to rely on the draft to do a lot for me. I want the draft. Right. I think for me, the draft is often a place to find rentals, to find last pieces, because there are not that many pieces. A lot of times there's this fake scarcity that happens where everyone's like, oh my God, there's only really one good second baseman in the draft, so we're all going to drop $40 on Marcus Semien after the guy dropped him at 35. You know what I mean? Like that happens all the time in drafts. So what I want to do is, trade. I don't love trading for prospects. I love trading for a young player on a reasonable deal. And so, so I'm just trying to consolidate, give people 2 or 3 guys, get one $5 player back, just build a roster where I'm going into next year and I've got cheap guys at every position. And like, I could theoretically field a team for next year without any needs. That's what I'm always trying to do going into the offseason. Be like, these are my keepers. I've kept a guy at every position. I have some needs, but I don't have anything like where anybody could look at my roster and be like, oh, And he's
You
like
know, you're
3
gonna go
outfielders in the
in.
draft.
Yeah, you're going to go to the draft and you're going to get Juan Soto because you have no other option other than to add Juan Soto.
Suddenly,
right?
I paid $85 for Juan Soto, and I'm like, I got nothing left.
that was rough.
Yeah.
I think one of the consistent things we've talked about through the whole season is like, especially in all kinds of keeper formats, like the draft is just not where you're doing your business. You want to do your business in every place around the draft. Obviously, not only like the off season is a big part of that, and spending to pay attention on 48-hour auctions is a big part of that. That's why we keep talking about them. But this part of the year where you can start of like see what guys are falling loose and see what guys are on the 60 that you could just stash going into the off season, and see what kind of guys you can just sort of have around.
I got a lot of $1 surgery returners.
Like the idea of having the option on a player makes a lot of sense, but you really want to have that option at a number that, like you said, is like keepable. That's like playable, right? So I think that's sort of where I fall on that. But I also understand the idea of like we have maybe 3 starts of Connolly Early left in this year, 4 starts or whatever at the most. I don't know anything about him. You don't know anything about him either. No one knows anything about him. I'm putting down $30 so we can all know very little about him in January or February, like when we do our draft. Like, I get that. And I think that's like, for some guys,
keeping him off the market. I'm pushing him to the draft so that nobody gets him this year at $3.
No one gets a deal. I've seen that happen where you just say, I don't even care. I'm not contending this year. I don't know what the price is going to be. I'm not going to thread the needle.
Poison pill.
Yeah, like we're going to the draft with this guy. It's just not happening right now because half the league doesn't have the money, and it's just it's just not the right time to have a guy that could be a difference maker. And I get that, and I think I would just be paying attention to what kind of guys, like what kind of Austin Rileys might be out there before you throw all your money at that. Yeah.
Speaking of playable,
are we talking about the dog?
Is it playable?
Is this dog the Miami Dog? Okay, description from the sign from the southern toe of Florida. Never heard Miami referred to as the southern toe before. Also don't like the mention of toe in a food description.
Oh, especially with dogs, like hot dogs that are kind of put together with different parts of the body.
From the southern toe of Florida comes the Cuban dog with the essential
there's toe in there.
There's no toe in the dog. With the essential smoked ham, Swiss cheese, pickles, and a dousing of mustard to your preference. Niv, I have to ask, looking at the photo here, did you ask for as much mustard as they gave you?
I did not have the option. My preference did not come into play.
That's a lot of mustard.
Okay, a lot going on here. The Swiss cheese is not melted, which seems like a missed opportunity.
Oh man. All right, so let's get it out of the way first. Toe, unacceptable word. Just unacceptable.
Nobody wants to think about toes when they're eating.
Yeah, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. No. Just no.
The dog kind of looks like a toe, too.
Come on, man.
Come on, don't.
Come on, I ate
this.
that.
That's not. No. It doesn't look like it. No, it's fine.
If you look in the middle picture, you can sort of see the ham peeking out there. There's actually a fair amount of ham underneath there. Now, I know you guys have had Swiss cheese, right? I know you guys have had it. And I know, like, there's a certain property of Swiss cheese that makes it very good for, like, a grilled cheese, which is that it's melty. It's a good melty cheese. And have you ever had warm Swiss cheese that didn't melt yet?
It's kind of plasticky.
Yeah. It's just not right. It's kind of plasticky. It has a little... Like, if you melt it, good. And if you have it cold, I could sort of see that, like whatever. Swiss cheese, just slice it off the block and have a piece. But when it's warm in the middle, because it had that hot dog sitting on it, but then it's like cold at the corners, like every bite is a little like, what is happening right now? But all that being said, toe aside, we got pickles, mustard, Swiss cheese, ham. Guys, it's a good combination of flavors. There's a reason that's good. So
like a ham and cheese sandwich with a hot dog in it.
Yeah, that's
I guess a Cubano. It's supposed to be the Cubano or whatever.
Cubano, yes. With like the hot dog carrying the weight. Like instead of having a giant stack of ham, it's like here's a little bit of ham and a hot dog. Right? So Playing the role of ham today is hot dog, and also some ham.
I just think they missed the best part of the Cuban. They missed the marinated pork. Like the mojo pork is sort of the thing that makes the Cubano the Cubano.
Yeah. I mean, look, man, there's a hot dog. I mean, it's a deli cold cut ham and a slice of Swiss cheese. Like what? Like, come on. Like the Nats are bad. The Marlins are bad. I expected much worse. The only person phoning it in is the person who referred to Miami as being on the toe of Florida. That person has punted their job for the rest of the year.
Or they're just trying to have a little bit of fun.
A little bit of fun, yeah. We gotta have fun with language. Trying out for their off-season gig. I did want to report back. I don't have pictures, but I did get a report of a pastrami focused hot dog that was there for the Mets game. And it was obviously like the criticism levied against it. This is coming from one of my auto-newers, so shout out to, I think it was Doorbot in Slack. If it wasn't Doorbot, I'm going to make myself look like a fool. But pastrami, so that's the same Mets dog they did last year when I went. It's like a pastrami with a little bit of coleslaw on it, and it's good. They warm up the pastrami real nice, and it's a good thing. The challenges here are that this pastrami and all this other, like the ham and everything, it's all boar's head, right? It's not like someone is smoking or making like a really good Jewish pastrami or a really good like whatever.
It just came out of the package.
Yeah, it just came out of the package, and so you're gonna have to sort of deal with that. But it's still like it's a fun thing to have on a hot dog. So I think the New York one gets a little shout out.
Try the pastrami dog.
And then I got some friends going to the Pirates game tonight, so I hopefully will have a Pirates and a Braves report for you guys next, because I'm going to go to the Braves game on Monday and also maybe Tuesday.
And then we'll have to figure out what we do in year 2.
Yeah. Where do we go from here? I think
we got to get one of those chefs making up our hot dog test kitchen so we can do a little compare and contrast. I think that's the next step.
I think it's only fair. The only way you can actually work with chefs is to pit them against each other and have a cash prize that probably determines like the future of their business on the line. So
the great hot dog challenge.
Chef Ryan McLaughlin and Chef Michael Armstrong head to head going at it for the ultimate hot dog battle. They're so far above that they would never agree to those conditions. But they'll at least help us.
Yeah, they would be helpful. The other thing I wanted, I did give it some thought about next season because, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but hopefully I can come back. And you got to remember with the way the schedule is now, a bunch of teams that the Nats went away to will be here next year.
Okay.
Right. So we have a lot of
haven't covered. I mean, we obviously haven't done 30 dogs this year. So.
Yeah. My stomach did not like when you just said that. I really hope I haven't had. Oh man, I need to go eat a salad, you guys.
Yes, you do.
But yeah, I think there's going to be some new teams next year that we can catch, and we'll see if this keeps going. I'm very curious. Like, I think the Nats have a really cool thing going here, and I know a couple of the ballparks do something similar, and I think. Yeah, it's super fun. So hopefully the Pirates one and the Braves one is fun, and hopefully we don't have any more appendages in these descriptions. Cause...
yeah, just a general rule. I mean, I just wouldn't put food and body parts like together in a description. Like, just keep them separate. Right. That's all. That's all you got to do. That's the only rule I have about writing a description of a hot dog. All right, Niv, we appreciate your time, your insight, and the work you're doing, especially with the gut. I mean, that's just a lot of wear and tear. So we really appreciate you taking one for the team for us again. Look forward to catching up with you again next week.
All right. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
It's our senior hot dog correspondent, Niv Shah. He's also the founder of Auto New. Get to catch up with him most Fridays throughout this season.
We should have had him sign a waiver.
On that note, we are going to go. I'd like to thank our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. You can find Eno on Blue Sky, EnoSaris.bscout at social. I am DVR.bscout at social. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. Enjoy the weekend. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.